Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Didi. I'm a South African living in New York City. And on this channel, I have been talking a lot about my internal thoughts that I have on a daily basis. I want to say thank you one more time about all the amazing, thoughtful responses I've received, whether it's been directly to my inbox, to my Instagram, or on the channel, like in the comments. I feel like there's been just so much genuine interaction that I really appreciate so much. As usual, for this video as well, if you have any thoughts, I would appreciate hearing them because we're all in this together. I feel like we're here on the planet Earth, and a lot of us are just fumbling our way through life. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to offer it at any point in this video. I'm going to be talking about my relationship to food today. Obviously, we all have different things that trigger us or that make us feel uncomfortable or that could set us back. So please take care of yourself. If you feel like this is not a video that you can watch, please click off right now and come back for another video or watch some of the other videos that I've done. But that's what I'm going to be talking about. I actually made notes today because I was feeling so nervous and wanting to get it right. I have to always be careful with things like that I'm not like driving myself to be perfect. And I kept having to say to myself, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. And so here I am. I think this is going to be a long video, so please bear with me. I also am someone who watches videos sometimes on 2 times the speed or 1.5 times the speed. So I encourage you to do that for this video as well, because I do that a lot. Okay, let me dive in. I feel like I'm dilly-dallying. All right, so the way that I first came to really think about in a serious way or realize my relationship to food was when I first moved out of the house when I was 18. At that time, it was a time of a lot of turmoil for me. I had just finished high school. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, who I am, what I wanted to do in this world, and I wanted to take a year gap. And at that time, my mom was like, my mom has been an educator for 40 years, so she values education highly. And so I was like, no, I want to take a year break. And obviously, given the context of apartheid and everything our parents had to fight for, I think it was like, what does this child think she's going to do? Take a break to do what? So in the end, I ended up going back, not going back, but going to study at Varsity College. I decided to do like a 1-year program just to like get my parents and everyone off my back. It was funny because my dad was on the other side, like, it's fine, do what feels right for you, you know. And then my mom was like, you better study, honey. Okay, so by the grace of and the generosity of my sister and my mom and my family, I was able to get an apartment in Hatfield, and this was the first time I was living away from home. And I think that the reason why this is the point where I've actually had to realize my relationship to food is because it's the first time that I was outside of the home and I didn't have like an interpreter or a social translator, or like I almost want to say like a layer of blubber or a layer of protection around me, in the sense that I didn't have my parents with me or my brother or my sister. So I was confronting the world myself. And of course, even before this point, I was like when I was in school and doing other extracurricular activities, but not in the same way where I had my own place and I could decide for myself what time I go to bed, what time I wake up, how I spend my day, how I spend my money. You know, not that I had much money, but I had an allowance, you know, at the time, which was also new because growing up, we didn't have an allowance. So there were a lot of new things that were happening all at the same time. And I also had lots of questions around like, what am I doing with my life? And so when I moved into this apartment in Hatfield, something completely unexpected happened. I had access to what I guess a lot of white people had access to their whole lives, because I lived in a white area, being Hatfield for the first time. And I didn't know that what came with that was access to anything and everything, including food. I could eat anything. Like literally, if I wanted pizza, it was down the road. If I wanted a pie, it was down the road. If I wanted a hot dog, a Boerewors roll, anything you can imagine, sushi, it was a walk away. I didn't even have to get on a taxi to get there. I could just walk and go get it. And so that created a big, I would say, moment of realization of, oh, wow, I've never had to think about my relationship to food because it was being sorted out by someone else, that person being my mom. So I thought I could make a list of like how growing up, what was the way that we dealt with food, or like what our relationship was to food growing up. And then I'll give you a list of how my current relationship with food is. So the first one is we didn't have much junk food at home, right? Like the most junk food that I had growing up was like diskopase, Twiggles chips, the ones that came in that big bag from the factory. The only other thing, what else was it? Sherbet, like things like that. Kool-Aid in a little packet. What else? Oh, mapopatani, which is basically like a homemade popsicle. And we also sold those. We sold Twiggles chips and we sold mapopatani at home. So for me, it didn't really feel like a junk food. It felt like, okay, this is something that is bringing us money. So, nkase just toko, you know what I mean? Like I had to be careful about not eating the stuff that was there because obviously there was a bottom line. So there was like an entrepreneurial like connection to it. And it also, we always had it at the house. So I just didn't feel like it was junk food. It was just like something that we sold. And then we also had, my dad every now and then would like sneak in some Rolos or like Magnum ice cream. But that was the extent of like the junk food that we had. And I wouldn't say that at home we ever had a cabinet where you ever could just open up and have cheese curls that you could choose to eat at any point. We had junk food that was brought in, we ate it, and that was that, right? Like a small little packet, except for obviously the factory amount because we were selling it. And then the second thing is that we didn't eat meat every day. My parents are both Tswana from different tribal groups, cultural groups, ethnic groups. I don't know how to describe it, but it's different clans. That's the English word. And so both of them grew up basically in an area that I would say was quite rural. And so their relationship to food was also different to my relationship to food. But that ethos that they had growing up about like being thoughtful about what you harvest, being thoughtful about whether you're going to slaughter an animal for food, they brought that into the house with them. And so that was infused in the house. And because they're both Tswana, I would say that traditionally a Tswana meal doesn't always have meat. Our food doesn't revolve around meat. A lot of times we'd have pap or bohobe, which is what we call in Setswana. And bohobe is essentially cornmeal or mealie meal that's ground up into like a powder, and then you mix it with water. Some people add margarine or butter and salt, but it's essentially just like the cornmeal and water, and it's called different things in different parts of the continent. In Kenya, I think it's called ugali. In other southern African countries, it's called sadza. In Sima, in some places, but it's a starch or like a staple food that is prevalent throughout the continent in different parts, and it's called different things. But bohobe is what we call it, and that's like the main thing. And then we'd usually have like some sort of a vegetable with it, like let's say cabbage or spinach, moroho, or masonja, or mashed potatoes, or moroa tamati, or milk, or inkomazi. There's a lot of different things that we'd have the pap with, and it wasn't always meat. And so we didn't grow up eating meat at every meal. So that was a big difference, or that's how I grew up. And then number 3, we didn't waste food. That was like a principle that we lived by. You don't waste food, and that would show up or manifest in not buying too much food, right? Not that we could afford that, but we always had just enough at home. And then also not, like my mom would always cook enough for us to eat for that meal. Every now and then she might make a little bit extra, but that's because she's thinking about breakfast the next day or something like that, or skaftini, which is like your lunchbox. So we only just had enough. And so every time I would eat, when the food on my plate was done, that was it. There's no seconds, there's no some more. Maybe if you had some more, it was like a very little bit, like it wasn't a whole full other plate, right? And then there's also a conversation around like the kind of way that we prepare food. If you are eating an animal, there is like a tremendous amount of respect you have for the animal because it's had to die for you, or to die to be on your plate so you can eat and get the nutrients. So we use as much of the animal as possible. Maotwana, malana, dikilana, sebete, tlhogo, all those things we eat in our culture. So if we did have chicken or whatever, usually we'd get it like somewhere from the neighborhood where we knew where we were getting it from, and we'd either have them slaughter it or we'd slaughter it at home. Funny enough, I've never had that opportunity to do that, and I wonder if I want to, because I think that could also change my respect that I have for the food that lands on my plate. But that was that. And then also you eat what's on your plate. You eat everything that's on your plate, right? I actually have a vague memory. This is number 4, eat everything on your plate, right? It's kind of linked to the previous one, but I think it's slightly different in the sense that if you go and Hona le Moletlo, which is like a celebration or festival, you get served something, you eat what's on your plate. And I used to get so nervous sometimes because depending on whose house you were at or which auntie was dishing up for you, sometimes they dish up so much food. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to be able to finish this. And you're stressed out because it's like you're not allowed to waste food. It's like, oh, what's in it? Like you're just eating so much that you feel that you don't need food. So sometimes I would go to my cousins or like my brother and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to finish this. Can you eat it? And usually there'd be someone who could take it off my plate. But this idea that you don't waste food, also like you finish everything that's on your plate. I actually have a memory from one of the few times that we went to a restaurant. We went to Wimpy, and oh my gosh, I remember I went with my childhood best friend, and I don't remember the details, but all I remember is that we ate so much that we had to throw up. And I think the reason why we ate so much until we threw up was because we're eating with our eyes, firstly. Secondly, we were not used to going to restaurants and stuff like that. Thirdly, we were told that you must eat everything. Now we're at a restaurant and you're not finishing your food and you hardly ever go there. You're going to finish the food. And I remember my dad saying, if you're full, you don't have to finish the food that's on your plate. If you're done, it's okay. We can take it home. But that didn't sink in because it was like, we're at a restaurant. How dare we waste the food? But it ended in disaster. And it's actually a very blurry memory. I should call her and ask her, like, what happened that day? Number 5, we ate primarily for nutrition and we ate when we were hungry. Even saying it feels like such a strange concept, even though that's how I grew up. So those are the 5 things that's how I grew up, the 5 things. I'm so sorry. I'm feeling so nervous today. So please bear with me. All right. So now I'm going to share with you my personal list of what my relationship to food is and how I deal with food. And I think I've actually put this in order of how the order of how much I use it. So number 1, or how I deal with it. So number 1 is self-soothing. Food is my primary numbing agent, anesthesia, coping mechanism, coping tool. It's the thing that I use day, night, noon to feel better. I literally eat after a long day that was stressful. I eat when I'm sad. I eat when I am happy. I eat under every circumstance. And I know that everyone does, but there's something slightly different about the way that I eat food, or the way that a lot of people who binge eat or who are emotional eaters eat. We are eating from a place of food is going to make me feel better. And I think it's a way of avoiding to deal with the actual emotion. And today I actually was looking at like resources that I can put in the description box, and resources that could also be helpful for me. And something that I found to be very helpful is this word wheel that Mel Robbins developed, where she basically puts a whole bunch of different words that describe different emotions, and it gives you the opportunity to actually look at that and feel, what am I feeling? Because the way she says it, and I'll add the link to the video where she talks about this, it's a short video. She's basically like, a lot of us know the emotions sad, happy, angry, right? Or worried or stressed. We don't have as much vocabulary around describing our emotions as we normally would with other things. And so she developed a wheel that helps you kind of pinpoint what the emotion is. So I self-soothe a lot with food. That's number 1. Number 2, I use food as a social lubricant, right? Yes, in the same way that you would use alcohol, wine, whatever, I use food as that. It's like food is central to all of my social engagements. If there's an activity that I'm doing, oh, let's take a walk and get some ice cream. Let's go have lunch together. Come to my house, I'll cook you dinner. Oh, let's go to this restaurant and try this meal. Let's go try this cocktail at this place. And it's wonderful and great, but because food is central to every interaction or every social engagement that I have, I don't think outside of that. And actually, there's so many other things you could do with friends and family that isn't centered on food. But yeah, I use it as a social lubricant because it's something that we can do while we connect. Number 3, satisfying cravings. Now, I really need to go to a doctor about this because I feel like the cravings that I have are extreme. But I think it's also not just a physical hormonal thing, because I think it's partly that. But I think it's also like, for me, it tips over into, how do I put this? An obsession. It's like I'll wake up in the morning and I'll think about having a bagel with cream cheese and salmon, and I will not stop until I get it. Okay, and this is exacerbated by the fact that I live in New York City, where it's a 24-hour city and you can have anything you want whenever you want. I remember living in Manhattan, and I lived across the road from a place that sold a 24-hour, shop. What was it? West Side Market. Like a supermarket, basically. And it was open 24 hours a day. I could get sushi, chicken, a full chicken, roasted chicken, rotisserie chicken. I could get at any time. Okay. Sandwiches, you name it, I could get it at any time. And I gained so much weight in that time because I was so stressed. I was working 2 if not 3 jobs, and I was studying, and I had a whole relationship to take care of, and I was far from home, and I was in a university where it was like I have to pay to be there. And I'm not talking pay to be there, and I didn't always know where the money was going to come from. So I was tremendously stressed a lot of the time, and so I would go across the road and buy nibbles any time of the day. And in general, not just in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, you have 24-hour delis. A deli or a bodega is basically like spaza shopo, So, and then also there's Instacart, there's Uber Eats, there's Drizzly, there's all these apps where you don't even have to lift your body off the couch. You can literally just, and whatever it is you want will arrive at your house. So it's been made worse by that, like I can have anything I want when I want. And actually the person who's come the closest to describing this phenomenon is another person called Didi Ntle. Didi Ntle is my full name, and she has a YouTube channel called Small Town Didi. I love her channel. She's amazing. I've actually met her in person. I know her. And I will link the video where she talks about that, and I think I'll try and add a timestamp so you can see exactly what she's talking about, because she's come the closest to explaining in detail what that feels like. Number 4, I use it to pass the time because I'm bored or I'm seeking a distraction, right? And this one is more about like repeated patterns. And I would say that this is something that I feel like I've developed more and more since being in the US. And that's because of the high levels of stress that I've had to live through and move through while living here. It's like a different type of stress, or like the stakes feel higher here because it's like if I fail, I go home and I feel like I've wasted money and time. Whereas at home, if I fail, I just go home to my mom's house, I'm already home. But here it's like you're moving continents. It's like I just feel like I've invested so much more, and it feels like the drop would be higher because I've climbed the ladder and like struggled so much, and some of the ladder doesn't even have rungs at this point. So I don't know how the fall would feel like. And so, these patterns that I've developed to deal with the stress of living here and what has come with being in a South African moving continents to be here and not having family here is that I have developed like behaviors and patterns that are new. So something like watching TV and automatically having an association with having snacks or having a drink while I'm watching TV. And now the way that I combat it, I can talk about that later as well, is that there's some shows where I do that and I reserve that for those shows. But in general, it's like a hard thing to stop when it's a pattern that it's like you've created this path for so many times for so long in your brain that it's hard to undo. If I'm sitting in front of the TV and I'm watching something, I want a snack as well. And then I also find myself eating like big portions of foods because it's also like unconscious eating. Next thing you know, I feel sick because I've eaten so much. Because I'm watching TV, I'm not actually eating, and I don't even know half the time if I'm tasting the food because I'm so like involved and engrossed in whatever it is that I'm watching. But it's a pattern, right? And then number 5, which is the last one, is that it's like there are remnants of an old way of being. And by that, I mean remnants of some of the things that are great and wonderful and in between about my upbringing. So something like eat everything that's on your plate. That works fine when you're at home and your mom is making your portions for you. But when you move countries and you go to a country where the portions are big enough for 3 people, it's a problem. It's a problem. Where you are having to contend with these ethics, principles, guidelines that you've had in your backpack for a long time and you're applying them in a new context where actually they don't quite apply, but they drilled into my brain so deeply that it's hard to undo. And then I do this thing where then I want to get leftovers, and then the leftovers are in the fridge, and then now because I've got leftovers and I don't want to waste food, I'm now forcing myself to eat the leftovers. It's a whole thing. It's a whole dilemma. Okay, so those are the 5 things that I think are part of it. And I've had to really think about what it is exactly about why there's a different list now that I have to the one that I had growing up. Because actually, I'm so lucky to have grown in a home where that was the relationship to food. But I've pinpointed it to a few things. Number 1, I live in a totally different continent. I live in the capital of capitalism. I live in New York City, which is a very different place than Garankuwa, South Africa. And I think because I've moved continents, I've got new culture. I have a new culture around food that's related to where I'm living. And this culture around food is very closely linked to this capitalist, more, greed, there's never enough mentality. Whereas at home, there was such a thing as enough. When you were full, you knew you were full. And sometimes I wouldn't even say that I would be full, but I would be satisfied. I don't know when the last time it was that I've used the word I am satisfied after I've finished a meal. Now I'm full, because I think here the priority is to fill up as much as possible and as quickly as possible sometimes, right? Whereas at home it was like, are you satisfied? Have you had enough? Yes. And finding my way back to satisfied from full is quite a journey. So that's one thing. The culture around food is different. My culture around food has changed. Number 2, I do think that I have access to more things here than I had at home. Like a simple thing like the shop that I was closest to was a Checkers when I lived in Cape Town. I'd go to the Checkers. If the thing I wanted wasn't there, the thing I wanted wasn't there. Move on, find something else, and do on to the next. Here, there's like 4 delis within a 2-minute walking distance from my apartment. If it's not at that deli, I can walk half a block and go to another shop and find it, right? And there's also this like, you gotta get what you want when you want it attitude that I think I've also absorbed from being here. And I think I've always been like that, but it's like supersize me version of that, like get what you want. And it's also like the level of stress is so high that it's like, I need my digestive biscuits coated in chocolate and milk chocolate. I gotta eat it now. It's gonna soothe me. I need it, because it is like my medicine. It has been like my medicine for a long time. And another big thing, which is the third reason why I think it's exacerbated now and it's like so much worse, or like not so much worse, but that it's different, that my list is different from the one that I had growing up, is that if you think about advertising and social media around different things that people are addicted to or have unhealthy relationships to. Like if you think about alcohol, I can imagine that if you're an alcoholic, seeing an ad about alcohol can be quite a triggering thing. And I think I'm not seeing as many ads for alcohol. I do see a lot of like campaigns, where there'll be a party sponsored by Heineken or whatever. But that makes sense because if you're going to the party, you're probably drinking anyway, right? And then cigarettes, there used to be ads for cigarettes, remember, back in the day? And then they stopped doing that because it was like, this is something that's harmful, it could actually kill you. And then now you've got this ad saying, smoke this thing that could kill you. They stopped doing that. But the thing is with food, because we all eat food and it's something that we consume in order to live, there's a lot of liberties people can take. And I actually think that a lot of what we're seeing online and on advertisements is food porn and not food advertising. And it's like gone beyond the stage of just being about, hey, maybe you want to come eat this, or hey, maybe you want to come eat this from our restaurant. It's like, you got to eat this, and there's like, sour cream and cheese and all kinds of things. It's gone overboard. And I personally have been having like this conversation in my head, like I wish there was legislation around this so that we can have a conversation around what's too much, but then also how do you do that around something that everyone consumes, food. So yeah, I have a hard time actually on social media because there isn't actually a button you can press to filter food content. Like I wish I could do that. And I'm sure there's a lot of us who wish we could do that for various reasons, because disordered eating is a spectrum of different ways of being around food. There's a whole list of different ways or different language or different words you could use for disordered eating and different conditions. There's different disorders, right? And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people could benefit from not scrolling through happily on social media and seeing this gooey nacho what and then now wanting to have to go get it. Yeah, I don't know if you could follow that, but I do have a few things that I do to kind of counter this because it's a journey, and it's actually wonderful that I'm at a place where I can talk about this and not get emotional because I've been able to move past. I'm in the part of my journey where it's no longer just an emotional thing. It's actually more of an analytical, cerebral conversation where I'm observing myself deal with this or like move through this. And I feel like I'll get there one day, but I also have to just be patient with myself. So these are some of the things that I do. If you have things that you do that help you have a more healthy relationship with food, please let me know. I know there's some people who have never had an unhealthy relationship with food, and I'm so envious and so curious also to hear, like, can you tell me what it is? What is your relationship to food and how do you keep it at that place? Because for some of us, it's like, whoa, the wild, wild west. So number one thing that I do is I look at the menu before arriving at a restaurant. So if I know that I'm going to be meeting someone somewhere to eat dinner or lunch, I'll look at the menu before we arrive or before we get there or the night before sometimes or the day before. And I'll choose what I'm going to eat. And I also have to talk to myself like, okay, you also have to remember that American portions are big. So you don't need an appetizer and an entree and a dessert. You can just do a main or 2 appetizers and dessert, or just a starter and dessert, or just a main and no dessert. Like there's so many different combinations that I've been playing around with depending on what the food is. So I look at the menu beforehand and I really have a conversation with myself to remember the portions are huge and you don't need to eat everything. The other thing is I arrive hungry. And this is also like one that couldn't work for everyone, but it works for me because if I'm arriving hungry, I will feel less guilty. Still not great about eating as much as I feel I need to eat. And I also feel like it's easier for me not to eat too much when I'm around other people that I'm not super close with. So that can help a little bit. And also, again, the point here is not to eat to a point where you feel sick. Some of us, myself included, eat to a point where I feel sick. All right. And then not having junk food at home. That's something that's huge. Like I'm someone who cannot afford to have chips, biscuits, things just lying around. The only thing that's like junk foodish that I keep at home is like these mapopotani popsicles that are like 15 calories a pop, and it's not even about the calories, it's just about like it's something that reminds me of childhood, and it's easy to grab and it's satisfying because it's sweet, and it's also not like something that I will feel guilty about if I am looking at calories, because I yo-yo through different things, right? And then I also I have popcorn, but not popcorn that's pre-popped. I have popcorn kernels, like returning to my roots where we pop our own popcorn over a stove. I'm doing that because then I can think about it and then I can actually do it myself and I can add as much salt or as little salt as I want. All right. And then the other thing that I do is I show myself compassion. Like I have to remind myself that there's life on the other side of a binge eating blur flare up moment. Like it's okay. I can live. I will be fine, after this moment, and tomorrow is an opportunity to choose differently. The other thing that I do is I pinpoint the cause of the flare up. If I'm in a space where I'm able to like take a beat, and most of the time I am, to be honest, like I can pause for like a second and just be like, what are you feeling? Okay, right now you're gravitating towards Instacart because you want to get whatever it is that you want to get because you're feeling sad. Why are you feeling sad? Because you miss home. Okay, what can you do to get to that? Okay, you can call your mom, you can call your sister, you can call your brother, you can call your dad, you can call your friends from back home, you can look at photos, you can talk to your husband about how you're feeling. You can also have a cup of tea, right? Something that's soothing, that's warm, that also involves like some sort of a ritual and a ceremony leading up to drinking it, because it's like that's also part of it, that's like there's a satisfying feeling of like going on Instacart, looking for what I want, clicking a purchase and then having it arrive. Like that's the process that is also like satisfying. And so finding new ways of doing that, right? But also pinpointing, and as I mentioned, the word wheel that I talked about that Mel Robbins has is also a helpful tool. I'm lucky that I do have quite a lot of words to describe what I'm feeling, because I do a lot of work on really finding the perfect word to describe what I'm feeling. But even then, the word wheel has words that I don't use. And then the last thing, which I already mentioned, is like creating activities and rituals around other ways of connecting with food and other ways that you can find soothing, whether that's going for a walk, getting some fresh air, meeting friends for bowling, something else that is got to do with engaging with other people, but that isn't centered on food. So that's my list. I feel really wonky and wobbly today. I think it's because I'm on my period. And one other point that I'm realizing I never made, which was such a big point at the beginning when I was preparing this video, is that something that I realized that is actually, for me, partly at the root of overeating, eating too much, binge eating, is a low self-worth or a low self-value or a low self-esteem. I think that somewhere within myself, there's a part of me that believes that I am not enough. And so I fill myself up because I want to make sure that I am enough. And I think it manifests in different ways. And I'm still working through this. That's why I'm not able to talk about it fluently, because I'm still in the process of discovering and figuring out and like getting to the kernel of like what it is about not feeling enough that is causing me to eat a lot or to surround myself with food or to use it as a social lubricant and all the other things that I mentioned. And I think the closest I've come to understanding it is that, let's say I am sitting at home and I'm reading a book, or I'm sitting at home and I'm watching something, or I'm just sitting at home, right? There must be, or I feel there's something in me that believes that me alone, I alone, me as me is not enough. That I need to surround myself with other things to make myself feel whole, or to make myself feel like I am enough or worthy of that moment, even just that moment, to exist in that moment. I need to be doing something. It's really hard to find the words. Language is inadequate. I hope you can follow a little bit of what I'm saying. If I get to a place of being able to talk about it more fluently, I'll come back and I will talk about it. But for now, that's the beginnings of grasping at understanding the underlying, true underlying issue that I personally have, that is what the overeating is masking, is the self-worth, I'm not enough narrative somewhere deep in me. And I think it's also tied up with being a people pleaser. Those two things I think go hand in hand. But I'll talk about people pleasing another time. I feel like this has been 40 minutes. I don't know how long it is. I can't see on the video how long I've been speaking. So that's also part of what's causing me to feel wobbly. Oh my God, 32 minutes. Lord have mercy. I might reshoot this and do another video. I don't know. If you've watched until this point, thank you so much for joining me. Please let me know how you are doing and what your relationship to food is. And again, thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. I read everyone. I'll respond to everyone. Please do write to me. Let me know what your relationship to food is. If there's anything in what I've said that resonates. Again, I recommend watching this on 2.5 or 2 times the speed, or 1.5 times the speed, because obviously I speak slower because I'm trying to think through what I want to say, but I don't think you need to listen to it at that same speed. But maybe this is me again letting my I'm not enough, low self-worth, so low self-value show. Watch it at the speed that you want to watch it. Okay, let me go now before I start spiraling. I hope you have a wonderful day further. Goodbye.